All right, Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at the meaning of the word Maya. Now, Maya is a really important word and also a philosophical concept in Bhakti Yoga. A lot of people have heard the word before in Eastern philosophy in general, but don't always understand its full meaning. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I put together a little presentation I'm going to put on the screen for you to follow along with. Let's put it into full screen mode. Here we go. So what is Maya? Well, in order to explain this concept, we need to start by talking about who we are as spiritual beings within reality. Big topic, right? This gets into the metaphysics of Bhakti Yoga. We, as spirit souls in the material universe, and the material universe itself is part of what is called the Tatastha Shakti. That is, that we exist as marginal entities. We have a special designation as spirit souls. One way of thinking about it is to think of the analogy of a fire. God is like the fire, and we, as Tatastha Shakti, as this marginal potency of God, are one with God in essence, but also different from God. So in that sense, we're like sparks that are emanating from a fire. We like to have bonfires on our in our backyard, and it's amazing to watch my little girls looking at the sparks. And my little daughter literally said, "The fire is jumping everywhere." And I said, "Yeah, it is, because sparks are the fire. They are identical with the fire. At the same time, they're different." And watching my daughter behold that, kind of mystery for the first time, it was really special. And I was just thinking about this analogy, which is used in Bhakti Yoga all the time, which is that as spirit souls, and even this material universe is in some ways understood as a kind of emanation from God. It's the same as God, but it's also different from God. So this is part of a larger concept in Bhakti Yoga that I'll talk about in a future video called Chinta-bheda tattva, which is a way of talking about inconceivable and simultaneous oneness and difference. But to make it a little bit simpler, as marginal entities, the unique thing is that we're part of God, but we're also different from God, and we're endowed with free will. As entities with free will, we can use our consciousness to turn our focus, attention, love toward God, toward our source, or toward the illusory shadow of God, which is called Maya. We can turn away from God if we want as well. And when we turn away from God, we turn towards what is called Maya. Maya means illusion. It means deceit, and it also means false pride. So when we turn away from God, we look into a realm which is also considered to be one of God's energies. Maya is also a part of God. So sometimes people will get this confused and say that, for example, when in yoga philosophy, we're interested in yoking ourselves to God, and a lot of the times that's talked about as something we do in contrast to getting enmeshed or entangled in the material world. But then sometimes you'll hear people say, well, that's because, the material world is all just an illusion. And they've maybe heard this word Maya before, and they say it's all just Maya, or it's all samsara, or it's all just an illusion. There's nothing real about it. In Bhakti, we say, no, it's not that the material world is not real. It's that it is illusory. It's God's illusory energy. So just in the same way, if I were to hold like a slinky, like have you ever seen one of those slinkies? I was playing with one the other day outside with my daughter, and you kind of gyrate the slinky. And if you gyrate it when the sun is out, you can see the shadow moving over the grass. And so is the shadow the real thing? Is the shadow the slinky? No, but it isn't. The shadow has a reality of its own. So similarly, this world that we can get lost in when we don't turn our hearts and souls and minds to God, it's a kind of illusion. It's a shadow world, a shadow realm, but it's not that it's unreal. In Bhakti Yoga, we say, no, it's very real. It's an energy of God. But just like the shadow is to the slinky on the grass, it's not actually the real thing. So Maya means illusion. It also means deceit and false pride. the hallmark of the world of Maya, when we turn into that illusory energy, when we turn into the shadow, is that we experience ourselves as apart from God. Now, it's impossible to be apart from God, which is why it's kind of a paradox to think about. When we turn away from God, we can't actually get away from God. So we end up in a kind of perverted or distorted shadow reflective space that's not the real thing. Um, it bears a resemblance in some ways to God, but it's not actually the thing that we're looking for. And then we get deluded into thinking that it's real. And so this is a realm, in a sense, that's created by God, specifically because God gives us the choice to choose God or to choose something that's other than God. Well, it can't be other than God, you know what I mean? So but we have this world to give us an experience of something that appears to be separate from God, which is why we call it an illusion. It's kind of deep thinking, but I hope you could follow along with that. And when we're in this world, of course, we define ourselves as separate. And that's why, even though we can't be, and we're a part of divinity. And so that's why we also have Maya related to this idea of false pride. So illusion, deceit, and false pride. There's a really nice verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is one of the central texts of Bhakti Yoga. And Krishna is speaking. Krishna, of course, is God. And so Krishna is speaking to Brahma, who is the creator of this material universe, at the time where Brahma is setting out to create the universe. And he says, "O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality." So he says then, in that sense, that it is an illusion. But then he says, "Know it as my illusory energy. That reflection appears to be in darkness." So let's read that again. "O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy." So anything that we invest ourselves in that has no relation to God is an illusion, but God facilitates that illusion for us through one of his energies, which is called Maya, which is kind of making up all of the dramas that we get so entangled with in the material world, whereby we forget who we are and we forget our source. Krishna similarly says in the Bhagavad Gita, "I am the sort," to Arjuna, who's sort of inquiring about the nature of God and reality, and Krishna's talking to him. "I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts." So here he's saying, I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. So this world is real, right? It's just as real as the spiritual world because it all comes from God. But it's the wise person who understands this and then is able to see God in all things, material things as well as spiritual things. And in a sense, then one is able to become fully committed to spiritual life. So another really nice quote about what Maya is and what our calling is in response to Maya, which is to turn our whole hearts to God so that we don't get tripped up in illusion. Now, this is a quote from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who first brought Bhakti Yoga to the United States in the 1960s. He was the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. Yoga Maya means the mercy of the Supreme Lord, which connects a devotee in transcendental loving service of the Lord. And Mahamaya means the external potency of the Lord, which puts a conditioned soul into illusion that he will be happy by material adjustment. So here's a really interesting quote from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Sometimes we just call him Srila Prabhupada. Yoga Maya, there's another type of Maya that's actually called Yoga Maya. And Yoga Maya he defines it as the mercy of the Supreme Lord that connects a devotee, or let's say a bhakti yogi, in the transcendental service and love with God. So there's also this really interesting distinction, which is that Maya also means mercy. There's a lot of texts that in the Bhakti Yoga tradition that talk specifically about how Maya means mercy. So that's kind of funny because how could it be that Maya is illusion but is also mercy? And the answer to this is really simple, that when someone starts saying, who am I really? And where is my spiritual source? And how do I turn my attention to that from illusion? When we start taking that up, then everything that's happening in the material world becomes an agent of God's mercy and blessing and instruction and training and guidance for us. So, for example, someone who is just completely invested in themselves and living under the illusion that they are separate and not seeing themselves as eternal parts of God, they may experience something in life that they don't like as an extreme disappointment, and they may be, just really angry about it. I know I feel that way a lot, right? Because I'm a total conditioned soul, right? But when we start practicing bhakti yoga, the idea is that all of those experiences that we would usually experience as apart, they start to become the agents of our change, our growth, and our awakening spiritually. And so the same illusory energy experienced from the standpoint of spiritual life, the same world of Maya that we're sort of living in all the time, can become instructive. My guru likes to say it's like cosmic sensitivity training. So that, again, when we start taking to spiritual life, the same illusory energy of the material world becomes our guide and our teacher. And it is the channel through which God's mercy comes in and guides us naturally toward turning our attention back to God, which is our true source of happiness. So again, Swami Prabhupada says, Yoga Maya means the mercy of the Supreme Lord, which connects a devotee in transcendental loving service of the Lord. And Mahamaya means the external potency of the Lord, which puts a conditioned soul into illusion that he'll be happy by material adjustment. So the other part that's interesting about this is that why would we be in this position? Well, Prabhupada's telling us that it's because we're given free will. And with free will, we can choose, do I want to take to spiritual life, or do I want to go live in the illusion of being separate from my source? If we want to go and live under the condition of illusory separation from God, God completely facilitates that by enchanting us with God's illusory energy. And that's called Mahamaya. Whereas the same situations in life, the same world that we're all living in, experienced spiritually, is called Yoga Maya. And it's the energy by means of which God brings us along in our spiritual path. But isn't that interesting that God is basically saying, if you want to be apart from me, that's fine. I've got like a whole AI program for you, artificial intelligence. You can go and explore and trip out in the illusion of separateness as much as you want. I'll facilitate that for you because I want you to be happy. And if you're going to choose relation to me, I want it to come from your free will, because love is based on choice. Love can't exist without, in some ways, freely choosing it. At least for us, entities in the Tatastha Shakti, the unique way in which we experience God is by choosing God. And in order to choose God, we also have to have the access to choosing something other than God. And so God fulfills our desires if we want to go play in the illusion of separateness. So he has two different kinds of Maya in this sense. Okay. So isn't that kind of neat? I really think that that's really beautiful. When we regularly practice bhakti yoga, which is the practice of turning our hearts, our minds, and our souls to God, we experience mercy rather than bewilderment and illusion. Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So there it is again. We might be in a world that's very easy to get hypnotized into forgetting that we are eternal spirit souls, that we are eternally sparks that are part of the fire. It's very easy to forget. I know I do it all the time. And yet the more we practice constantly loving and being devoted to God, being servants of God, the more that we embody these practices, talking about it, thinking about it, filling our lives with the topic of God and the fact that we are spirit souls, that we take this knowledge in regularly, then we naturally start to get filled from within by the knowledge that we need to keep growing and walking toward God, which also means that we start having the knowledge to see God in all things, the normal things that we would experience as total mazes of complexity and illusion and apartness from God. all of the intricacies of life start shimmering with God. And so from within, God gives us the knowledge that we need to keep progressing in spiritual life. Very, very beautiful. So it's hard to take to spiritual life, though, because we are in a little bit of a battle, you might say, against Maya, because we have the natural, very easy in this world to want to gratify our senses, very in temporary satisfaction, and to want to keep being entangled in the idea of our apartness or our separation. So in this sense, turning to spiritual life is very difficult. And there's a story in a little book about Maya, if you ever want to check this out. It's called Maya, the Divine Energy of the Supreme. It's a good book about Maya from Bhakti Purushottam Swami. Anyway, in this chapter, he says, why do we not give up Maya? Why is it so hard to turn from that illusory energy? A very nice story will help us understand why people do not give up Maya even after so much suffering. There once was a beggar who had not eaten for quite some time. He was very hungry and his stomach was causing him considerable pain. Wandering aimlessly, he eventually came to a temple. In order to get relief from the pain in his stomach, the beggar walked up to a pillar in the temple room and, wrapping his arms tightly around the pillar, pressed his belly against it. By pressing his belly to the pillar, he felt some sort of relief from the pain his hunger was causing him. Thus, he was standing there holding on tightly to the pillar. Anyone who passed by the pillar after offering worship was surprised to see the beggar standing there holding on to the pillar. As they passed by him, the beggar would implore them to give him something to eat. After some time, one lady asked the beggar why he was standing there holding on to the pillar in such a strange way. The beggar explained that he was very hungry, so hungry that he was suffering from pains in his stomach, and that holding on to the pillar was giving him some small relief. The lady was moved to hear this sad situation and immediately wanted to help. She was carrying some puffed rice that she had just offered to the Lord. So she said to the starving man, I have some puffed rice. Please take and eat it. But the beggar was not ready to give up the pillar. Without letting go of the pillar, he could not accept the puffed rice. But still he was standing there holding on tightly and pressing his belly against the pillar, attached to what little relief that strange act brought him. Surprised, the lady asked, why don't you let go of the pillar and take this puffed rice? If you eat this food, then you won't be hungry anymore. But the beggar said, no, I can't let go of this pillar. By pressing myself against the pillar, I'm getting some relief from the pain in my stomach. If you don't let go of the pillar, the lady reasoned, then how can you take this food? Give me the rice while I'm still holding on to the pillar, the beggar suggested. If I let go of the pillar, the pain in my stomach will get worse. While still embracing the pillar with both arms, the beggar pressed his palms together in reverence and then laid them flat, cupping his hands together and requesting the lady to give him the puffed rice. Though she found the scene quite ridiculous, the lady put the rice in the beggar's outstretched palms. Still, there was a problem. How could he eat? With the pillar in front of him, the beggar could not bring his mouth to the food. But if he let go of the pillar with his arms, he would have to separate his hands as well, and then all the puffed rice would fall onto the floor. What could he do? Thus, holding the puffed rice in his palms, the beggar continued to stand there, unable to find a solution to his problem, while the pain in his stomach got worse and worse. If the beggar let go of the pillar, then for a little while at least his stomach pain would get worse. That's true. But if he ate something, the pain in his stomach would go away completely. The beggar did not want to give up the temporary relief he was getting by pressing his belly against the pillar. He was not willing to tolerate this temporary inconvenience. But if he would just let go of the pillar, though his stomach pain would get worse for a short time, he would be able to eat, and then he would be completely free from stomach pain. The beggar's dilemma is quite similar to the problem we all must contend with in this material world. So, a simple little reading that I thought you might enjoy, and a story about why it's difficult to give up the illusion of being separate. In this world, when we try to find pleasure apart from our relationship with our source, we experience pain. And as we experience pain, then we look for temporary forms of relief from that suffering, and we get attached to them. And then we're so afraid to give them up because we know then that we'll have to deal with the pain. But in order to turn to spiritual life and to take spiritual medicine, in some ways we have to learn how to let go of those attachments and the fears that we won't be taken care of, or that the pain will increase and get worse if we don't maintain our attachments to false things in this world that are very impermanent and that don't really give us happiness. So that's the dilemma that we're in. And from the standpoint of bhakti yoga, sometimes taking the spiritual life, things get a little bit worse before they get better. Sometimes it's like that. It's hard to start turning to God, because in order to do so, inevitably we have to develop a higher taste, and we often have to let go of things that are right now temporarily relieving a deeper sense of pain or disease that we feel. So I hope that you have enjoyed this little talk about Maya, that it's given you some good things to think about. I'd love to hear your comments in the comments section below. Share a reflection or two that came up for you while listening to this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below, or email me at info@nightlightastrology.com. I would love to hear from you guys. And until next time, Hare Krishna.